"I'll sleep in the barn. Just don't send me back." That's the line. Spoken in a doorway with rain hammering the porch boards and a woman's dress soaked through to nothing. A lantern hung on a nail behind him. The flame barely moved. She was 33 years old, a seamstress who had outlived a husband and inherited his debt. The man holding those papers rode the district every week, waving them at every door. The county saw no reason to question him. She had no claim to anything. The attic room in Philadelphia was gone. If this story reached you, drop a comment and tell me whether you believe some people are worth waiting for or whether she waited too long. If you are new here, subscribe and turn on notifications. The name she'd married into was worth less than the debt attached to it. She could not even say no. And still, she asked for a corner of a stranger's barn. Not the house, not a chair by the fire. Just somewhere the rain couldn't reach her, somewhere she could be gone before she caused him trouble. Why would a man who owned the largest grain elevator in the county, a man who trained himself to hide a crippled hand in a careful handshake, answer the way he did? Tell me where you're watching from tonight. 3 weeks before that doorway. 3 weeks before the rain. In Philadelphia, Alice Fairweather folded her last good dress into a carpetbag and did not look at the window. The attic room above the print shop had been hers for 2 years. The landlord's wife had brought her tea once when the coughing was bad. That was the closest thing to friendship she had earned in all that time. She was 33 years old, a seamstress, a widow, a woman whose husband had died, owing more than he'd ever told her, and whose name now belonged to a man she'd never met. Nathaniel Standish. She had seen his handwriting before she ever saw his face. A letter, forwarded through 3 addresses, informing her that her late husband's debt had been purchased and consolidated, that the original creditors had been satisfied, that the balance, plus interest, plus fees for the purchase itself, now exceeded $1,100. She did not have $1,100. She did not have 11. The letter was polite. It offered terms. It mentioned in the 3rd paragraph that a woman of her skills might work off the debt in service to the Standish household, room and board provided, until the balance was cleared. Room and board provided. She read that line 4 times before she understood what it meant. The carpetbag held 2 dresses, a sewing kit, a Bible she had not opened in years, and a document she should not have kept. A coroner's report, signed by a clerk she had once assisted, back when she was young enough to believe that knowing the law would protect her from it. She closed the bag. She did not look at the window. The Stagecoach West cost her the last of her money and most of her pride. She told herself she was going to a cousin in Texas. A lie. She had no cousin. She had nothing but a name she'd heard once, a town called Marrow's Bend, and the hope that a man like Nathaniel Standish would not ride that far to collect. She was wrong about that. The cattle auction outside Marrow's Bend happened every spring. Ranchers came in from 3 counties. The town swelled with dust and noise and money changing hands. Alice arrived on the last day of it, her dress stained from travel, her hair escaping its pins, her carpetbag held against her chest like a child holds a blanket. She had not eaten since the morning before. The auction ground was a trampled field at the edge of town. Men in wide hats stood in clusters, talking prices. Women in clean calico watched from the shade of a canvas awning, their faces turned away from the sun and from her. She asked a man where she might find work. He looked at her dress. He looked at her hands. He said nothing and walked away. She asked a woman at the dry goods counter the same question. The woman smiled, but the smile did not reach her eyes. "We don't hire transients," she said. "You might try the saloon." Alice did not try the saloon. She stood at the edge of the auction ground and watched the cattle move through the pens. The smell was thick, manure and hay and something else, something metallic. Blood, maybe. Or just the iron in the dirt. A man was leaning against the fence rail, his hat pulled low, his right hand resting on the top board. He was not watching the cattle, he was watching the crowd. She did not know his name yet. She did not know that he owned the largest grain elevator in the county, or that the elevator was run so plainly that most assumed it belonged to someone else. She did not know about the threshing accident, or the careful handshake he had trained himself to give, or the way he counted every sack of grain himself because he could not trust his grip to hold a pen steady. She knew only that he was the first person who did not look away when she met his eyes. He was 35 years old, weathered, bearded. His hat was the color of dust. His shirt was clean but not new. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at her carpetbag. Then he looked back at her face. "You're not here for the auction," he said. It was not a question. "No," she said. He nodded. He did not ask why. He did not ask where she had come from or where she was going. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "The feed store is hiring," he said. "Ask for Mrs. Lowell. Tell her Jacob sent you." He handed her the paper. Their fingers did not touch. She unfolded it. A list of prices. Oats, barley, corn, weights and measures. Nothing useful to her at all. She looked up to thank him, but he was already walking away. His right hand was in his pocket now. She noticed that, the way he kept it hidden. The way his shoulders were set against something she could not see. The feed store was closed. Mrs. Lowell had gone home for the day. The boy sweeping the porch told her to come back in the morning. She did not have a place to sleep. The church at the end of the main street had a white steeple and a door that was not locked. She pushed it open. The pews were empty. The light through the windows was the color of old honey. She sat in the back row and did not pray. She thought about the document in her carpetbag, the coroner's report, the signatures, the way a single inconsistency in a sworn statement could reopen a case everyone had considered closed. She thought about Nathaniel Standish and the letter and the phrase room and board provided. She thought about the man at the fence rail, Jacob, the list of prices, the way he had looked at her without pity or suspicion or anything she could name. Another small thing she noticed, he had not asked her name. The door opened behind her. A woman in a gray dress and a tight bun stood in the aisle, her hands folded at her waist. "We don't allow vagrants in the sanctuary," she said. Her voice was polite. The politeness was a wall. "I'm not a vagrant," Alice said. "I'm looking for work." The woman looked at her dress, at her hands, at the carpetbag on the pew beside her. "We don't have work for women like you," she said. "Women like you." Alice picked up her bag. She walked past the woman without speaking. She did not look back. Outside, the sky was turning the color of bruises. The wind smelled like rain. She had nowhere to go. She had no money. She had a name that meant debt, and a face that meant trouble, and a skill that no one in this town wanted to pay for. She started walking. The storm broke before she reached the edge of town. The rain came down in sheets, soaking through her dress in seconds. She could not see the road. She could not see anything. She walked until she saw a light. A lantern hanging on a nail beside a door. The door opened before she could knock. He stood in the frame, lantern light behind him, rain driving sideways across the porch. His shirt was dry. His boots were dry. He had not been outside in hours. She was shaking. She could not stop. "I'll sleep in the barn," she said. "Just don't send me back." He looked at her for a long moment. The rain hammered the boards. The lantern flame did not move. "I've got a spare room," he said. "No questions. No pity." Just those 4 words. She followed him inside. The house was smaller than she expected. A front room with a stone fireplace. A kitchen beyond it. A narrow hallway leading to 2 doors. The walls were bare. The furniture was plain. Everything clean, everything worn, everything sufficient, and nothing more. He pointed to the second door. "Yours," he said. "There's blankets in the chest." She stood in the middle of the room, dripping onto the floor, her carpetbag clutched against her chest. She did not know what to say. He turned away. He was already walking toward the kitchen. "Stove's still warm," he said. "I'll put coffee on." She did not move. She watched him go. She watched the way his right hand stayed in his pocket, even inside his own house. Another small thing she noticed. The spare room had a narrow bed, a chest, a window that faced east. The blankets in the chest smelled like cedar and dust. She changed out of her wet dress and hung it over the back of the single chair. She wrapped herself in a blanket and sat on the edge of the bed and listened to the rain. She could hear him moving in the kitchen, the clink of a pot, the scrape of a chair. She did not go out to join him. In the morning there was a cup of coffee outside her door. She found it when she opened the door at first light. A tin cup, steam still rising, set on the floorboards where she could not miss it. No note, no explanation, just the coffee. She picked it up. She drank it standing in the doorway, looking out at the gray morning light. The rain had stopped. She did not see him that first day. She heard him leave before dawn, heard the creak of the wagon and the slow clop of hooves on mud. She washed her dress in the basin in her room and hung it by the fire to dry. She swept the floor. She found a torn seam in the curtain over the front window and mended it with thread from her kit. When he came back at dusk, the curtain was whole again. He looked at it for a long moment. He did not say anything. The second morning, there was coffee outside her door again. The third morning, the fourth. She began to wake before dawn, listening for the sound of his footsteps in the hallway. She never heard them. The coffee was always there when she opened the door, as if it had appeared on its own. On the fifth morning, she opened the door and found a piece of bread beside the cup, thick and dark and still warm from the oven. She sat on the edge of her bed and ate it slowly, tasting every bite. Another small thing she noticed. He had no woman in this house, no wife, no housekeeper. He baked his own bread. The feed store opened again that week. Mrs. Lowell was a tall woman with gray hair pulled back tight and hands that never stopped moving. She looked at Alice the way women in town had looked at her before, measuring and distant. "Jacob sent me," Alice said. Mrs. Lowell's face changed. Not softened, exactly, but something shifted behind her eyes. "You sew," she said. "Yes." Mrs. Lowell nodded. She pointed to a pile of grain sacks in the corner. "Rats got into these last month. Can you patch them?" Alice could patch them. She spent the morning bent over the canvas, her needle moving in the rhythm she had learned before she could read. When she finished, Mrs. Lowell paid her in coins and told her to come back Tuesday. She walked back to the ranch with money in her pocket for the first time in months. Jacob was at the table when she came in. He looked up. He looked at her face. He did not ask where she had been. She set a coin on the table in front of him. "For the room," she said. He looked at the coin. He pushed it back toward her. "I don't need your money," he said. "I can't stay for free." He was quiet for a moment. His right hand was flat on the table, the fingers slightly curled, the knuckles thick with old scar tissue. She had not seen it this close before. "Then help me with the mending," he said. "There's shirts that need work." She nodded. She picked up the coin. She did not look at his hand. The mending became the ritual. Every evening he left a pile of cloth on the kitchen table. Shirts with frayed cuffs, socks with holes worn through, a canvas coat with a torn pocket, work clothes, all of them, clothes that had been worn hard and mended many times before. Every morning she left the finished work in the same place, folded neat, seams straight, buttons tightened. They did not speak about it. They did not speak much at all, but she began to notice things. The way he counted the grain sacks himself when the wagons came in from the elevator. The way he used his left hand for everything that required grip. his right hand only for steadying, for guiding. The way he never shook hands with the men who came to do business, always nodding instead, always keeping that hand in his pocket or at his side. Another small thing she noticed. The men called him Mr. Malone. They spoke to him the way men speak to someone who matters. But the house was plain. The clothes were worn. Nothing about him said wealth. She asked Mrs. Lowell about it one Tuesday while she was patching sacks. "Jacob Malone," Mrs. Lowell said, "owns the big elevator out on the county road. Has for years." Alice's hands stopped moving. "He doesn't act like it," she said. Mrs. Lowell snorted. "That's Jacob. Could buy half the town if he wanted. Never does." Alice finished the sack. She did not ask any more questions. Autumn came. The light turned golden and then thin. The mornings grew cold. The coffee was still outside her door every day. The bread appeared with it now, sometimes a slice of dried apple, sometimes a piece of cheese wrapped in cloth. She began leaving things for him, too. A button sewn back onto a coat he had not asked her to mend. A loose thread trimmed from his hat. Small things. Things he might not notice. He noticed. One evening she found a bundle of new thread on the kitchen table. Good thread, silk and cotton, colors she had not seen since Philadelphia. No note, no explanation. She held the thread in her hands for a long time, feeling the smoothness of it against her fingers. Winter arrived with a wind that cut through everything. Snow piled against the windows. The road to town became impassable for days at a time. They were alone together in that small house, and still they barely spoke. But the ritual continued. Coffee, bread, mending, the careful arrangement of small things left for each other without acknowledgement. One night she was sewing by the fire when he came in from the barn. His coat was dusted with snow. His right hand was tucked against his chest, the fingers curled tight. She stood. She crossed the room. She reached for his coat without thinking. Their fingers almost touched. Almost. He stepped back. The movement was small, but deliberate. He hung the coat himself, his back to her, his shoulders set. "Thank you," he said. He did not turn around. She went back to her sewing. She did not look at him for the rest of the night. Another small thing she noticed. He was careful not to let her see his hand. Not the damage. The way it would not grip. She understood. She had her own things she did not let people see. The coroner's report was still in her carpetbag, hidden beneath her Bible. Sometimes at night she took it out and read it by candlelight. The signatures, the dates, the careful language describing how a man had died. She had been 18 when she learned to read those documents, young enough to believe that truth was a shield. She knew better now, but she kept the paper anyway. Spring came slow and cold. The snow melted into mud. The road to town opened again. She had been in his house for 5 months. She had mended every piece of cloth he owned. She had swept every floor, washed every dish, tended the fire through every cold night. She had never kissed him. She had never touched his hand. She had never once said what she was beginning to feel. Neither had he. But one morning she opened her door and found a wildflower beside the coffee cup, small and blue and blooming too early for the season. She held it to her chest and closed her eyes. She stayed like that for a long time, feeling the cold air on her face and the warmth of the cup in her hands and the weight of all the small things that had accumulated between them, quiet as snowfall, steady as breath. The cattle auction came again, 1 year turning. Alice walked to town that morning with Mrs. Lowell's list in her pocket. Thread, buttons, a bolt of canvas if the price was right. She had money now, her own money, earned by her own hands. The main street was crowded, ranchers from 3 counties just like before, dust and noise and the smell of animals. She saw him before he saw her. Nathaniel Standish stood outside the dry goods store, speaking to 2 men in clean coats. He was taller than she remembered, leaner. His hat was new, his boots were polished. He had a sheaf of papers in his hand. She turned. She walked the other way. She did not run, but he had already seen her face. By nightfall, the whole town knew. The woman at the feed store told Mrs. Lowell. Mrs. Lowell told the man who ran the livery. The man who ran the livery told everyone who bought grain from Jacob Malone's elevator. Alice Fairweather, that was her name. The widow who owed $1,100 to a man from back east. The woman living in Jacob Malone's house. The woman who had been living there for months. A kept woman, they said, or worse. The whispers reached her at the counter of the dry goods store 3 days later. A woman she had never met leaned close to another woman and did not bother to lower her voice. Sharing his bed, I heard, and still pretending to be respectable. Alice set down the thread she had been holding. She left without buying anything. That night she did not sit by the fire. She did not leave her mending on the table. She stayed in her room with the door closed, listening to the silence in the house. Jacob knocked once. "Alice," he said. She did not answer. She heard him stand there for a long moment. Then his footsteps moved away. The next morning, Nathaniel Standish rode out to the ranch. She watched from the window of her room, east-facing, the glass cold under her fingertips. He sat his horse at the edge of the property and did not dismount. Jacob walked out to meet him. The two men spoke. She could not hear the words. Standish held up the papers. He pointed at the house. He smiled. Jacob's shoulders did not move. His right hand stayed in his pocket. When he spoke, his voice was low and even. She could not make out a single word. After a while, Standish rode away. Jacob came back inside. He did not come to her door. He did not mention it at supper. But she saw the way the men in town looked at him after that. The careful distance. The questions they did not ask. A man who shelters a debtor is a man who might not honor his own debts. She was costing him something. She could feel it. The ritual changed. She stopped leaving her mending on the table. She took her meals in her room. She rose before dawn and slipped out to the feed store before he could offer her coffee. He noticed. Of course he noticed. One evening he caught her in the hallway. "Alice," he said. She did not look at his face. "I'll be gone by the end of the week," she said. He was quiet for a long moment. His hand, the damaged one, hung at his side. She could see the way the fingers would not straighten. "Where will you go?" "I don't know." He did not argue. He did not tell her to stay. He stood there in the dim hallway and let the silence grow between them, and she understood that he would not ask her to ruin him. That was the mercy and the cruelty of it. He would let her go to save himself. She went back to her room. She took out the coroner's report and read it by candlelight. The signatures, the dates, the way the handwriting changed between the first page and the last. Another small thing she noticed. She had seen that second handwriting before. The storm came 3 days before she meant to leave. Not rain this time. Wind. A spring wind that tore shingles from the barn roof and drove dust through every crack in the walls. She heard the first gust hit the house at noon, and by dark, the world outside was nothing but noise. Jacob had not come back from the elevator. She stood at the window in the front room, watching the county road disappear into brown air. The glass rattled in its frame. The fire in the hearth bent sideways with every gust that found its way down the chimney. She should have been packing. She should have been counting the coins she had saved, planning the stage route, deciding where a woman with a debt and no name could disappear to next. Instead, she stood at the window and watched the road. It was full dark when she heard the wagon, the creak of wheels, the slow protest of the axle. She opened the door before he reached the porch. He was covered in dust. His hat was gone. His coat was torn at the shoulder. His right hand, the damaged one, hung at his side in a way that meant pain. She pulled him inside without thinking. The door slammed behind them. The wind screamed against the walls. She led him to the chair by the fire and pushed him into it, her hands on his shoulders, her voice somewhere she could not find it. She saw the hand then, really saw it. The fingers swollen, the knuckles dark with bruising, a gash across the back, crusted with dried blood and dirt. "What happened?" she said. He did not answer. He was looking at the fire, his face gray, his breathing shallow. She went to the kitchen. She pumped water into the basin. She found the clean cloth she had set aside for mending and tore it into strips. When she came back, he had not moved. She knelt in front of him. She took his hand in both of hers. He flinched. The movement was small, but she felt it. "Let me," she said. He looked at her then. His eyes were dark and tired and full of something she could not name. He let her. She cleaned the wound slowly. The water turned brown, then red. The gash was deep but clean. She wrapped it with the cloth strips, her fingers steady, her breath held tight in her chest. He watched her work. He did not speak. When she finished, she did not let go of his hand. "Jacob," she said, his name. She had never said it to his face before. "You should have let me go," she said, "months ago, before Standish, before the talk." He was quiet for a long moment. The fire crackled. The wind howled. "I built this house with one good hand," he said. His voice was low, rough at the edges. "I run that elevator with one good hand. I've never asked anyone for help, and I've never needed to." She waited. "But I needed you to stay." She felt the words land in her chest. She felt the way they settled there, heavy and warm. He turned his hand in hers, the damaged one, the one he never let anyone see. He turned it palm up, showing her the scars, the twisted fingers, the place where the threshing blade had taken everything that made a man useful. "I can't hold a pen," he said. "I can't grip a rope. I can't shake a hand without training myself to hide what's wrong." His voice did not waver. He was not asking for pity. He was showing her something true. "But you never looked at it like it was broken," he said. "You just mended my shirts and left them on the table." She thought about all the mornings, the coffee, the bread, the small things they had given each other without words. "I'm not worth the trouble," she said. "I owe more than I can ever repay. Standish will take everything you have if you stand between him and that debt." Jacob shook his head. "I looked at those papers," he said. "When he came out here, I asked to see them." She went still. "The signatures don't match," he said. "The first page and the last, two different hands." She felt the blood leave her face. "I noticed," she said. "I noticed that, too." His eyes searched hers. "How would you know what to look for?" She pulled back. She stood. She crossed to her room and came back with the carpetbag, her hands shaking as she opened it. The coroner's report was where she had left it, beneath the Bible, folded into thirds. She handed it to him. "I was 18, she said. "I worked for a clerk in the county coroner's office, recording testimony, copying cause of death statements, learning how documents are made and how they're signed." He unfolded the paper. He looked at it for a long time. "This is a death certificate," he said. "Yes." "Whose?" She sat down across from him. The fire was the only light. "A man who died in Philadelphia," she said, 5 years ago. The official cause was an accident, but I copied the original testimony before it was amended, before the signature changed." Jacob looked at her. "Why did you keep it?" "Because I know what forgery looks like," she said, "and I knew someday I would need proof." The wind was dying now, the worst of the storm passing. In the quiet she could hear her own heartbeat, loud and unsteady. She waited for him to pull away, to see her differently, a woman who had kept secrets, a woman who had been watching and waiting and planning. Instead, he set the paper on the table between them. "You learned to read lies before you learned to trust anyone," he said. "Yes." He nodded slowly. "That's not a flaw, Alice." She looked at him. The firelight caught the edge of his face, the beard going gray at the corners, the lines around his eyes. "I've been hiding," she said, "this whole time, hiding here with you." "I know," he said, "and you let me stay anyway." He was quiet for a moment. Then he stood. He crossed to the chest by the door, the one where he kept his coat and his winter gloves. He opened it. Inside were blankets, new ones, new. A whole stack of them, thick wool in colors she had never seen in this house, blue and gray and a deep red that caught the light like embers. He had bought them. She did not know when. She did not know where. He lifted the top blanket and carried it back to her. He wrapped it around her shoulders without speaking, his hands careful, his damaged fingers gentle against the wool. "Winter's not over," he said, "and neither are you." She looked up at him. She felt the weight of the blanket. She felt the weight of everything he had given her without asking for anything back. "Jacob," she said. He shook his head. "You don't have to say it," he said. "You just have to stay long enough to find out what happens next." She reached up. Her hand found his, the damaged one. She held it the way she had held it when she wrapped the wound, steady and sure. She did not let go. Outside, the wind had stopped. The dust was settling. Through the window, she could see the first stars appearing, faint and far away. Another small thing she noticed. He was still standing there. He was not pulling away. The county clerk's office was smaller than she remembered offices being. A single room with a desk, a wall of ledgers, and a window that let in too much afternoon light. Alice stood at the desk with 2 documents laid flat in front of her, the coroner's report she had carried for 5 years, and the debt papers Nathaniel Standish had waved at every door in the district. Mrs. Lowell stood beside her. The retired notary, Mr. Haskell, sat behind the desk with spectacles pushed up on his forehead. Jacob waited near the door, his hat in his hands, his damaged fingers curled against the brim. Nathaniel Standish stood across the room. He was smiling. He had been smiling since he walked in. The notary pulled both documents toward him. He studied them for a long time. He did not speak. Alice watched his face. She watched the way his eyes moved from one paper to the other. She watched the moment he stopped reading and started comparing. "The signatures," she said, "the witness line on the debt papers, and the amended cause of death on the coroner's report." Mr. Haskell set down his spectacles. "Same hand," he said. Standish's smile flickered. "That's absurd," he said. "I purchased that debt through legitimate channels. The original creditors were satisfied." The notary looked at him. He looked at the papers. He looked back at Standish. "The original creditors signed their names in ink that was mixed in Philadelphia," he said. "I can tell by the color. It fades to brown after 3 years." He pointed to the witness line on the debt papers. "This signature was written in the same ink as the amended testimony on that coroner's report," he said, "which means it was written in the same office by the same hand within weeks of each other." Mrs. Lowell leaned in. She looked at the documents herself. Her gray hair caught the light from the window. "I can see it," she said. "The slant is the same." Mr. Haskell nodded. "Whoever forged the witness signature on these debt papers," he said, "also forged the amended cause of death on a document that should have stayed in a coroner's archive." Standish's face had gone pale. "This is ridiculous," he said. "You can't prove anything based on ink color." "I don't have to prove it," Mr. Haskell said. "I just have to note it in the county record. And once it's noted, any judge in Texas will want to see the original creditor's testimony before he enforces a debt this size." He looked at Alice. "Do you know where the originals are?" "Philadelphia," she said. "In the clerk's office where I worked when I was 18. Mr. Haskell wrote something in his ledger." He did not look up. "I'll send a letter today," he said. "Until I hear back, this debt is suspended." Standish stood very still. The smile was gone now. In its place was something smaller. Something that looked, for just a moment, like a man realizing he had been outmatched. He looked at Alice. She did not look away. She did not gloat. She did not accuse. She simply stood there with her hands folded and let him see the woman he had underestimated. The woman who had learned to read lies before she learned to trust anyone. Standish turned and walked out. The door closed behind him. Nobody followed. In the days that came, he rode out of town the way he had ridden in. The county did not stop him. The sheriff did not question him. He simply left, and after a while people stopped mentioning his name. The talk changed slowly. Mrs. Lowell told the woman at the dry goods store what she had seen in the clerk's office. The woman told her husband. Her husband told the men who bought grain from Jacob Malone's elevator, Alice Fairweather, the widow who had been wronged, the woman who kept records and noticed things other people missed, the woman who had stayed in Jacob Malone's house for a year and never once lost her dignity. One by one, the whispers turned. The woman at the dry goods counter nodded to her now. The men at the auction ground tipped their hats. Mrs. Lowell started calling her by her first name. Nobody apologized. That was not how small towns worked. But they saw her differently now. They saw the steadiness, the patience, the way she had waited for the truth to surface instead of fighting back with anger. Another small thing she noticed. Jacob was still standing near the door. He had not said a word the whole time. He had not needed to. Spring came the way it always did in the Panhandle, slow, grudging. The mud dried in the county road. The grass turned from brown to pale green to something that almost looked alive. Alice stood on the porch of the house that had sheltered her for a year. The morning light was warm on her face. The coffee cup in her hands was the same tin cup he had left outside her door that first morning and every morning since. Jacob came out and stood beside her, not close, but close enough. The carpetbag was inside. She had not touched it in weeks. The coroner's report was still folded beneath her Bible, but she no longer took it out at night. She no longer needed to. The spare room window still faced east. But it was not the spare room anymore. It was hers. He had not said so. He had simply stopped calling it that. One morning he had knocked on her door and said, "Alice, breakfast is ready." And she had understood. She looked at him now, the beard going gray at the corners, the hat the color of dust, the right hand hanging at his side, the fingers curled the way they always were, the scars pale in the morning light. She reached over. She took his hand, the damaged one. He did not pull away. They stood like that for a long time, watching the light change over the county road, the grain elevator rising in the distance, the land stretching out flat and endless and full of nothing but possibility. "I'll sleep in the barn," she had said once. "Just don't send me back." He had never sent her back. He had never asked her to be anything other than what she was. Another small thing she noticed. His hand, in hers, was steady. When I think about them, I think about all the ways we learn to hide. The damaged hand tucked into a pocket. The coroner's report folded beneath a Bible. The debts we carry that were never ours to begin with. And I think about how rare it is to find someone who sees the hiding and does not ask you to stop. Who simply leaves coffee outside your door and waits for you to open it yourself. Maybe that is what love looks like when it has been tested. Not a declaration, not a rescue. Just a hand, finally taken. Just a room that stops being spare. Just two people standing on a porch, watching spring arrive, and knowing they do not have to face it alone. If this story stayed with you, tell me where you are listening from tonight and what moment touched you most. Was it the coffee outside the door, the blankets in the chest, the signatures that did not match? I want to know. If you would like more quiet evenings by the fire, lonely roads, quiet cowboys, and hearts finding their way home, subscribe and come back for the next one. Thank you for staying to the very end. I will see you in the next one.